Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into one of Florence Scovel Shinn's most powerful and transformative teachings, a principle that has helped countless individuals completely transform their financial reality, often in ways that seemed utterly impossible. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to effortlessly attract wealth while others struggle their entire lives, despite working just as hard, or even harder? What if I told you that the secret to opening the door to lottery money, unexpected windfalls, and financial abundance has nothing to do with luck, hard work, or even positive thinking as you've been taught? What if the real key lies in something you're doing right now, in this very moment, something so fundamental that you've probably never even noticed it? Now here's something that might completely shift your understanding of how manifestation actually works. You don't attract what you want. Let me say that again because it's crucial. You don't attract what you want. You attract what you are. Has this ever happened to you? You desperately want more money. You think about it constantly. You visualize it. You affirm it. Maybe you even pray for it. And yet somehow the financial struggles continue. Month after month, the bills pile up, the unexpected expenses appear, and that lottery win or financial breakthrough remains frustratingly out of reach. Why is that? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Florence Scovel Shinn discovered something profound that most people completely miss. Your entire reality is determined not by what you consciously desire, but by what you feel yourself to be at the deepest level of your consciousness. The outer world you see with your physical eyes isn't some random collection of circumstances happening to you. It's actually a perfect mirror, a faithful reflection of the inner commands you've been giving, often without even realizing it. But here's where it gets really interesting, and I want you to stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might completely change how you approach not just money, but every area of your life. These commands that create your reality aren't the words you speak out loud. They're not even the affirmations you repeat or the vision boards you create. The real commands, the ones that actually shape your circumstances, are feelings. Deep, subconscious feelings about what you believe to be true about yourself and your life. Think about it for a moment. When you look at your bank account, what do you feel? When you think about money, what emotion rises in your chest? Is it anxiety? Is it lack? Is it the heavy weight of never enough? What you're about to learn is that those feelings are not reactions to your circumstances. They're actually the creative force behind them. The external world is acting as a faithful servant, reflecting back precisely what your consciousness has been commanding it to show you. And most people have been giving the wrong commands their entire lives without ever knowing it. The wealthy person walking down the street isn't wealthy because they happen to have a lot of money sitting in their bank account. That's not how this works at all. They have money because something shifted inside them first. They became wealthy in consciousness before a single dollar ever appeared. This is the hidden truth that the manifestation industry doesn't want you to understand, because it would put them out of business. The transformation happens from the inside out, never the other way around. Poverty isn't about your bank balance either. You could win the lottery tomorrow, receive millions of dollars, and if poverty consciousness is still running the show in your subconscious mind, that money will disappear faster than you can imagine. We've all seen the stories, lottery winners who end up broke within a few years or even worse off than before. Why does this happen? Because the external circumstances changed, but the internal state remained exactly the same. Their consciousness was still programmed for lack, for struggle, for this can't last. And so it didn't. Every person who has ever won the lottery, whether they realized it or not, had already assumed the consciousness of a winner before they bought that ticket. Something in their internal world had shifted. Maybe it was just for a moment. Maybe it lasted days or weeks. But at some point, they genuinely felt like someone to whom good fortune comes naturally. They occupied that state, and the universe, the mirror, had no choice but to reflect it back. This is the journey every person must take if they want real, lasting change. It's not about the mechanics of buying more tickets or choosing better numbers. It's about the fundamental shift in who you believe yourself to be. If this resonates with you and you want to go deeper into these teachings, hit that subscribe button. I'm here creating content that gets to the real truth behind manifestation, and I'd love to have you along for this journey. Now here's where this gets really exciting, and I want you to pay close attention, because this is the part most people miss entirely. You have the power to do this deliberately. You're not at the mercy of random internal states or childhood programming or whatever feelings happen to show up today. You can consciously assume the feeling of your wish being fulfilled. Right now, in this moment, you can choose to occupy the state of being wealthy, of being fortunate, of being someone to whom abundance flows naturally and effortlessly. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that when you make this internal assumption, when you genuinely feel it as natural and real, not as something you're pretending or hoping for, but as something that simply is, the outer world has absolutely no choice but to conform. It must rearrange itself. The mirror must reflect the new image. This isn't mysticism or wishful thinking. This is how consciousness works. The decisions you make about who you are internally create the impact you see externally. Every revelation about manifestation ultimately comes back to this single principle. Change the inner state and the outer. Circumstances must follow. The question isn't whether this works. The question is whether you're willing to make the shift, to step into that consciousness and stay there long enough for the reflection to catch up. Write in the comments, "I'm ready for the shift," if this resonates with you. Now, I want to go even deeper into exactly how you make this shift real, because knowing the principle is one thing, but actually living it is where the real transformation happens. Most people approach manifestation like they're standing at a wishing well, tossing coins and hoping something magical happens. They read about the law of attraction, they repeat affirmations in the mirror, they make vision boards, and then they wonder why nothing changes. Here's the revelation that changes everything. What Florence Scovel Shinn taught isn't wishful thinking. It's not positive affirmation. It's not some new age philosophy that works for some people and not others. This is universal law, operating with the same precision and consistency as gravity. It works for anyone who applies it correctly, and it works every single time without exception. But here's where most people sabotage themselves without even realizing it. And this is absolutely crucial to understand if you want to see real transformation in your financial life. When you want money, when you desperately desire it, when you think about it constantly with that aching feeling of, "I need this, I must have this," you're actually pushing it further away. I know that sounds completely backwards. Your logical mind is probably resisting this right now, thinking, "But if I want something, shouldn't I focus on wanting it more?" No. And here's the hidden truth behind why that doesn't work. Wanting implies lack. Every time you say, "I want money," what you're really communicating to your subconscious mind is, "I don't have money." You're affirming the absence, not the presence. You're making a declaration of what's missing from your life. And your subconscious mind, which is the real creative power behind everything you experience, doesn't argue with you. It doesn't question your declarations. It simply accepts whatever you're feeling as truth and goes about creating more of exactly that. When you feel lack, you create lack. When you feel want, you create more wanting. The journey from poverty to wealth isn't about increasing your desire for money. People in poverty often want money more desperately than anyone else. Yet that desperation keeps them trapped in the exact circumstances they're trying to escape. The real shift happens when you understand that your subconscious mind doesn't respond to desire at all. It responds to assumption. It responds to what you feel yourself to be right now in this present moment. When you feel wealthy, not when you want to be wealthy, but when you genuinely feel that you are wealthy, your deeper mind receives that command and begins externalizing wealth into your physical reality. This is the mechanics of how consciousness creates reality. The decision to feel wealthy rather than to want wealth is the turning point. It's the fork in the road where one path leads to endless struggle and the other leads to effortless abundance. The impact of making this distinction in your own life cannot be overstated. If you've been wondering why nothing's changed despite all your efforts, this is probably why. Put in the comments, "I see it now," if this is landing for you. Because what I'm about to reveal next will show you exactly how to make this feeling of wealth so natural that your subconscious has no choice but to manifest it. The door you're looking for doesn't open through excitement. It doesn't open through desperation or pleading or intense emotional states. Most people completely misunderstand this part, and it's why they exhaust themselves trying to manifest. They think they need to generate massive amounts of enthusiasm to pump themselves up into some kind of emotional frenzy about money coming to them. They visualize like they're watching a movie of their future life, seeing themselves on a screen somewhere in their mind, and then they wonder why nothing happens. That's not how the mechanism works at all. Florence Scovel Shinn discovered that the real key, the hidden truth that unlocks everything, is naturalness. It's feeling that it would be completely natural, almost ordinary, for you to receive this money right now. Not exciting, not shocking, not too good to be true, but natural. Like, of course, this would happen to you. Like this is simply who you are and what you experience. When you can settle into that quiet, calm knowing that wealth flows to you as naturally as breathing, that's when the transformation happens. That's when the door swings open. Think about something you already have in your life that you never question. Maybe it's a roof over your head, or a car that runs, or a job that pays your bills. You don't get excited about these things every single day. You don't desperately visualize them or beg the universe to keep them. They just are. They're natural to your experience. They feel normal, expected, completely unremarkable. That's the exact state of consciousness you need to cultivate around wealth and unexpected windfalls. It needs to feel so natural that it's almost boring. Here's something fascinating that most teachers never tell you: the time it takes for any assumption to become physical fact in your reality is directly proportional to how natural that assumption feels to you. This is the missing piece of the puzzle. If you're trying to assume you've won the lottery, but every cell in your body is screaming, "This is impossible, this never happens to people like me, this feels completely foreign," then you haven't actually assumed the state at all. You're just playing pretend, and your subconscious knows the difference. The journey from assumption to manifestation gets longer and longer the more unnatural it feels. But when something feels easy, when it feels natural, when you can rest in that consciousness without strain or doubt or constant effort to maintain it, manifestation must occur. Not might occur, not could occur, must occur. It's law. The decision you're being called to make isn't about working harder at visualization. It's about making wealth feel so ordinary, so expected, so naturally yours that your mind stops fighting it. Drop naturalness is key in the comments if this is clicking for you, because understanding how to cultivate this feeling of naturalness is exactly what we need to explore deeper. And there's a specific state of consciousness that makes this easier than you might think. There's a specific window of time every single day that most people completely waste, and it happens to be the most powerful moment you have access to. Right before you fall asleep, when you're in that drowsy, half-awake state where your body is relaxing and your thoughts are starting to drift, that's when the doorway to your subconscious mind swings completely open. This isn't some mystical idea. This is the behind-the-scenes reality of how your consciousness operates. Whatever concept you hold of yourself in those final waking moments gets sealed directly into your deeper mind, and from there, it must project outward into your physical circumstances. Think about what's been happening every night of your life up until now. Most people fall asleep, worrying about bills, replaying stressful conversations, thinking about everything that went wrong during the day, or feeling the weight of not having enough. Those feelings, those concepts of self, get impressed into the subconscious in that powerful threshold state, and then people wake up and wonder why the same patterns keep repeating. The impact of this single insight could transform your entire financial reality if you actually apply it. Your last waking thought is not just a thought. It's a command, a seed being planted in the most fertile soil you have access to. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that you need to craft a single, vivid scene that implies your wealth has already been received. Not vague, positive thinking like, "I am abundant," repeated over and over. Not watching yourself from a distance like you're viewing some future version of your life. You need something specific, something sensory, something that feels real in your body right now. Maybe you're hearing someone congratulate you on your unexpected windfall. Maybe you're physically feeling a check in your hands, sensing the texture of the paper, the weight of it, the reality of those numbers printed on it. Maybe you're experiencing the profound relief of knowing every debt has been paid, that suffocating pressure completely lifted from your chest. The key is precision with your senses. Your subconscious mind speaks in feelings and images, not abstract concepts. The more vividly you can construct this scene, the more you can actually feel it happening right now, not in some distant future, the more powerfully it gets impressed into your deeper mind during that drowsy state. This is the journey from imagination to manifestation, and the vehicle is this specific practice done consistently in that threshold moment before sleep. The decision you make about what to impress upon your subconscious in those final moments will determine what shows up in your waking life. Comment, "I'm claiming this," if you're ready to start using your nights differently, because what I'm about to share with you next is the exact technique for entering this state deliberately and making sure your scene gets sealed in properly. And there's a specific way to do this that makes all the difference between just visualizing and actually impressing your subconscious mind. One of the biggest mistakes people make on this journey is obsessing over the how. How will the money come? How will I win the lottery? How will this unexpected windfall arrive? What are the steps, the strategy, the logical path from here to there? Here's the revelation that will set you free from that exhausting mental loop. The how is not your concern at all. The ways and means by which your wish will be fulfilled belong entirely to your subconscious mind, and that mind is infinitely more intelligent, infinitely more resourceful, and infinitely more connected to possibilities than your conscious thinking could ever be. If something clicked for you in this video, if you felt that shift in understanding, go ahead and hit the like button. It's a simple way to let me know this content is serving you. Your conscious mind operates within the tiny box of what it already knows, what it's already seen, what seems logical and realistic based on past experience. But your subconscious mind has access to the entire field of infinite potential. It knows paths you've never considered. It can orchestrate circumstances, coincidences, and connections that your logical mind would dismiss as impossible. When you try to figure out the how, you're essentially telling your subconscious, "I don't trust you to handle this, so I'm going to limit the solution to what my tiny conscious mind can understand." That's not how transformation happens. Your only task, and this is crucial, is to occupy the end, to live in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, not the feeling of moving toward it, not the feeling of hoping for it, but the feeling of already having it. This is where most people completely miss the mark, and it's the hidden truth behind why their manifestations never materialize. They think of their wish instead of thinking from it. Let me explain what that means, because this distinction is absolutely everything. When you think of something, you're here and it's over there. There's distance. There's separation. You're looking at it from the outside. Most people visualize this way. They see themselves in their mind's eye, holding a check, buying a new car, living in a beautiful home. They're watching themselves like a character in a movie, but they're not in the movie. They're in the audience, observing from a distance. That distance is what keeps the manifestation at a distance. Thinking from your wish means you're already there. You're not watching yourself hold a check. You are holding the check right now, and you're feeling the actual texture of that paper between your fingers. You're not seeing yourself from the outside. You're looking out through your own eyes at a world where this has already happened. The impact of making this shift in perspective cannot be overstated. It's the difference between dreaming about a destination and actually standing on that ground. Put thinking from, not of, in the comments if this distinction is becoming clear. Because once you understand how to genuinely think from the end result rather than merely thinking about it, the entire manifestation process becomes simpler and more natural. And there's one more critical element about feelings that we need to address. Everything you see in your physical reality, your bank account, your living situation, the opportunities that come to you or don't, the money that flows or doesn't, all of it is effect, not cause. This is the hardest thing for people to accept because we're conditioned from childhood to believe the opposite. We're taught that circumstances create feelings, that reality happens to us, that we're essentially passengers in a vehicle we don't control. But that's backwards. Consciousness is the only cause. Your outer world is simply the effect of your inner state, projected outward like a movie being cast onto a screen. Your feeling is the evidence of your consciousness. When you feel lack, when you feel anxiety about money, when you feel like things are always hard for you, that's not you responding to reality. That's you creating reality through the state you're occupying. And here's where people get confused and think this teaching is asking them to deny what's real. You look at your empty bank account and someone says, "Just feel wealthy," and it seems like you're being asked to lie to yourself, to pretend something false is true. But that's not what's happening at all. You're not denying reality. You're occupying a new state of consciousness that must, by law, express itself outwardly. The current reality is simply the old state expressing itself. It's yesterday's consciousness, made visible. When you shift into a new state and maintain it, when you genuinely feel it as natural and real, you're setting in motion the transformation of your outer circumstances. The decisions you make about which consciousness to occupy today determine the reality you'll experience tomorrow. This is the hidden truth behind every success story, every rags to riches journey, every unexpected breakthrough. There is no such thing as luck. There is no such thing as chance or accident or random good fortune. There is only consciousness. When someone wins the lottery, when someone receives an unexpected inheritance, when someone stumbles into an incredible opportunity that changes everything, that wasn't random, that person, whether they realized it or not, had already assumed the state of winner. They had already been living in the expectation of good things coming to them. Maybe they didn't know they were doing it. Maybe they would deny it if you asked them. But somewhere in their consciousness, they felt themselves to be fortunate, to be the kind of person good things happen to, and their subconscious mind externalized that state into physical form. The impact of understanding this completely dismantles the victim mentality that keeps most people trapped. You're not at the mercy of circumstances. You're not hoping for luck. You're not waiting for some external force to smile upon you. You are the force. Your consciousness is the cause, and everything else follows. Right. I am the cause in the comments if you're grasping the profound shift this represents, because once you truly own this truth, once you stop seeing yourself as effect and start being the cause, there's a practical framework for how to actually live in this new state consistently, and that's what we need to explore more deeply. Before we go any further, I need to address something that stops a lot of people from even attempting this journey. There's this deeply embedded belief in our culture that wanting money is somehow unspiritual, that truly evolved people shouldn't care about material wealth, that poverty is noble and struggle builds character. If you've been carrying that belief, it's been sabotaging you every step of the way. Let me be absolutely clear. Desire for wealth is not unspiritual. Poverty is not a virtue. These are lies that keep people trapped in lack while pretending it's somehow holy. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that your inheritance is the kingdom, with all things already given to you. You didn't come into this world to struggle and suffer and prove your worthiness through deprivation. There is nothing unspiritual about living in abundance. Nothing. In fact, constantly worrying about money, living in stress and anxiety about how you'll pay your bills, being unable to help others or contribute to causes you care about because you're barely surviving. That state of consciousness keeps you stuck in fear, and fear is the real enemy of spiritual growth. Abundance, on the other hand, creates space for generosity, for creativity, for actually living out your purpose without the constant weight of financial pressure crushing you. This isn't about greed or materialism or chasing money for ego. This is about claiming what's already yours, about stepping into the state of consciousness that allows you to receive. The transformation from poverty consciousness to wealth consciousness is simply waking up to the truth that abundance was never separate from you. You've just been occupying a state that didn't allow it to flow. Now, I know some of you might be thinking this all sounds good in theory, but does it actually work in real life? Here's what you need to understand. These aren't theoretical ideas that someone made up sitting in an ivory tower. These principles have been tested by hundreds of people with documented, verifiable results. One man used these exact techniques and won $84,000 at a racetrack. A woman received lifetime monthly checks that covered all her expenses for the rest of her natural life. Another person received $3,000 within days of beginning the practice. These aren't fairy tales. These are real people who applied the law correctly and consistently, and their outer circumstances had no choice but to conform to their inner state. The law operates for anyone who applies it correctly, not just special people, not just the lucky ones, anyone. The impact these principles can have on your life depends entirely on one thing: your willingness to actually apply them, to occupy the state, to persist even when the outer world hasn't caught up yet. Comment: it works for me too. If you're ready to be one of those success stories, because understanding the principle is one thing, but there's a specific practical application that makes all the difference, and that's exactly what needs to be laid out in clear, actionable terms. When you hear religious or spiritual texts talking about faith, most people misunderstand what's actually being said. Scripture says, "According to your faith be it unto you," and generations of people have interpreted that as belief in something external, as hoping really hard that God will grant your request if you just believe enough. But that's not what faith means in the context of manifestation at all. Faith, in its truest sense, means feeling. It means the feeling that something already has happened, not the hope that it might happen someday if you're lucky. This is biblical psychology, the hidden truth embedded in ancient texts that most people read literally and miss entirely. Faith is the evidence of things not seen. Evidence, not hope, not wishful thinking. Evidence. The feeling itself is the evidence. When you have genuine faith in the manifestation sense, you feel the reality of the thing now, even though your physical senses don't yet perceive it. That feeling is the cause, and the physical manifestation is simply the effect catching up. The decision to cultivate this feeling, to live in it, to make it your dominant state. That's what transforms everything. Florence Scovel Shinn herself lived this principle in the most practical way possible. There was a time when she stood in New York City, completely broke, without a single nickel to her name. She desperately wanted to spend the winter in Barbados with her family, but she had no money and absolutely no visible means of getting any. Her circumstances were completely against her. Logic said it was impossible. Common sense said to give up the dream and accept reality. But Florence Scovel Shinn understood something most people don't. She knew the power of imagination. She knew that consciousness creates reality, that the inner world shapes the outer world, that what you build in imagination must eventually materialize in physical form if you persist in it. So instead of accepting her broke circumstances as permanent, instead of letting the outer world dictate her inner state, she did something extraordinary. She built a golden chamber in her imagination. She felt herself already in Barbados. She occupied that state completely, living in it, dwelling in it, making it more real to her inner senses than the cold New York streets her body was walking. That imaginal act, that decision to occupy the end regardless of current circumstances, became her outer reality. The money came, the means appeared, the trip happened. Not through struggle or figuring out the how, but through the natural unfolding of consciousness into form. Her journey from broken New York to relaxing in Barbados wasn't about luck or miracle. It was about law. Drop "Imagination creates reality" in the comments if you're seeing how powerful this really is. Because the specific technique she used to make that inner world so real that it had to manifest externally is something you can apply tonight. And it involves a particular way of engaging your imagination that most people never discover. In the fall of 1933, Florence Scovel Shinn was completely broke and longing to spend time in Barbados with her family. The desire was strong, but the circumstances were impossible. So she went to her teacher, a man named Abdullah, seeking guidance on this seemingly unsolvable problem. What Abdullah told her that day became one of the most important lessons in manifestation that's ever been taught. And it's the exact same principle that will unlock lottery money and unexpected wealth for you if you truly understand it. Abdullah didn't tell her to work harder, to save money, to figure out a plan. He told her something that probably sounded strange at first. Imagine yourself in Barbados. But here's the crucial part. He didn't tell her to imagine going to Barbados, or to visualize the trip, or to think about being there someday. He told her to imagine herself already in Barbados, thinking from that state rather than thinking of it. He said that if she occupied the state of consciousness of already being in Barbados, that state itself would devise the means to realize itself. She didn't need to figure out the how. The consciousness would create the path. This is the hidden truth that changes everything. When you think about something, when you think about having money, about winning the lottery, about financial freedom, you maintain separation. There's you here, and there's the desire over there, and you're reaching across a gap, trying to grab it. That gap is what keeps it perpetually out of reach. But when you think from something, when you think from the state of already having it, there is no gap. There is no distance. There is no longing, because you already possess it in consciousness, and what you possess in consciousness must eventually materialize in form. Abdullah taught that viewing the world from the state of the wish fulfilled is completely different from viewing the world while wishing for fulfillment. One is the consciousness of having. The other is the consciousness of lacking. And your consciousness, your state, is what creates your reality. The transformation happens when you make that shift from observer to occupant, from someone hoping for the thing to someone already being the person who has the thing. The impact of this shift in perspective is immediate in consciousness, even though the physical manifestation might take time to catch up. When Florence Scovel Shinn imagined Barbados, she wasn't daydreaming about a future trip. She was dwelling in the reality of already being there. She was thinking from Barbados, not about Barbados. She occupied that state so completely that her current circumstances in New York became less real to her inner senses than the imagined reality of Barbados. Right, I'm thinking from the end, if this distinction is landing for you, because there's a specific nighttime practice that makes thinking from the wish fulfilled almost effortless. And it's something you can start using tonight to completely reprogram your subconscious mind around wealth. Every single night, Florence Scovel Shinn would lie in bed and begin her practice. This wasn't casual daydreaming. This wasn't hoping or wishing or visualizing in the way most people understand it. She would close her eyes and imagine herself in her father's house in Barbados with absolute precision and sensory detail. And here's the critical part that most people miss. She didn't see herself. There from the outside, like watching a movie of herself on vacation. She was actually there, looking through her own eyes, experiencing it from the first-person perspective. She felt the tropical air on her skin, warm and humid, completely different from the cold New York winter surrounding her physical body. She heard the voices of her family members talking, laughing, the specific sounds of that house she knew so well. She felt the furniture, saw the rooms from inside them, experienced the reality of being in that place. And then, still dwelling in that imagined reality, still feeling herself in Barbados, she would fall asleep. Her physical body was in New York, but her consciousness, the part that actually creates reality, was in Barbados. Night after night, she fell asleep in that state, impressing it deeper and deeper into her subconscious mind. The transformation wasn't instant, but it was inevitable. Within 1 month of beginning this practice, Florence Scovel Shinn received a letter from her brother. He wrote that he had developed a strong desire to have the entire family together for Christmas, and enclosed in that letter was a steamship ticket to Barbados. The money she didn't have suddenly wasn't necessary. The means she couldn't figure out suddenly appeared through a channel she hadn't even considered. Her imagination didn't create something out of nothing. It selected that particular possibility from the infinite field of all possibilities and made it the reality that unfolded. This is how consciousness operates. There are infinite potential versions of your life existing as possibilities right now. In some of those possibilities, you win the lottery next week. In others, you receive an unexpected inheritance. In others, a business opportunity falls into your lap. All of these exist as potential. What determines which possibility becomes your actual experience? Your state of consciousness. The decisions you make about which state to occupy, which feeling to dwell in, which version of yourself to be. That's what selects from the infinite menu of possibilities and brings one specific timeline into manifestation. The impact of Florence Scovel Shinn's practice wasn't that she forced her brother to send a ticket. She didn't manipulate anyone. She simply occupied a state, and that state drew to her the circumstances that matched it. The hidden truth here is that you're always doing this, always selecting possibilities through your dominant state. But most people do it unconsciously, defaulting to states of lack and limitation. Leave "selecting my reality now" in the comments if you're ready to do this consciously and deliberately, because there's a specific story about someone who used this exact technique for money that's going to show you just how precise and powerful this law really is. There was a man who attended one of Florence Scovel Shinn's lectures, completely broke, desperate, and at the end of his rope financially. He had heard these principles before, but never really applied them. That night, something clicked. He made a decision that would change his entire financial reality. He decided to test the law with absolute commitment by imagining himself winning the 5 to 10 pool at Caliente Racetrack, a betting pool where you have to correctly pick the winners of 6 consecutive races. The odds were astronomical against him, but he understood by now that odds are irrelevant when you're working with consciousness. For 3 weeks straight, every single night without exception, he performed his imaginal practice. He would lie in bed and enter that drowsy state we talked about earlier, and then he would imagine himself at the track sorting through his betting tickets. He felt the tickets in his hands, the texture of the paper, the weight of them. As he sorted through them in his imagination, he felt the rising thrill of realization that each one was a winner. He had picked all 6 races correctly. The feeling was so real, so vivid, that goosebumps would rise on his skin, an actual physical response to the imagined scene. That physical sensation was crucial because it meant the feeling had penetrated deep enough into his nervous system to be registered as real. Then he would see the cashier at the window in his imagination. He watched the cashier count out the money, felt himself take that money, felt the bulk of it as he tucked it beneath his shirt against his body. Every detail mattered. Every sensation reinforced the reality of the scene. Night after night, he replayed this exact scenario until he fell asleep within the action, dwelling in the feeling of having already won. After 3 weeks of this disciplined nightly practice, he physically went to the Caliente Racetrack. And here's where the hidden truth of this law becomes undeniable. Every single detail of his imaginative drama was realized in the outer world. The scene he had rehearsed in imagination played out in physical reality, almost exactly as he had experienced it internally. The only variation was that instead of the cashier handing him currency, which is what he had imagined, He received a check. But the amount? $84,000. His subconscious mind had arranged every detail, orchestrated events entirely beyond his conscious knowledge or control to fulfill the assumption he had persisted in. This man didn't know which horses would win. He didn't study racing statistics or analyze jockeys or calculate probabilities. The transformation happened because he occupied the end. He assumed the state of winner, felt it as real, made it natural, and the law did the rest. Put "the law is perfect" in the comments if you're starting to see just how precisely this operates, because what happened next with a second person who heard this story is going to blow your mind and prove this isn't coincidence or luck, but actual law in operation. When Florence Scovel Shinn shared this $84,000 story at a subsequent lecture, another man in the audience was struck by something profound. If this was really law, if it wasn't just a lucky break or coincidence, then it should be repeatable. He approached her and asked if he thought it was possible to duplicate this success. Her answer was simple. Decide for yourself what scene to imagine, make it natural, feel the end with conviction, and don't concern yourself with how it will happen. Just live in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. 1 month later, this second man returned with a check in his hand, $16,000 from the exact same 5 to 10 pool at the exact same Caliente racetrack. He had used the identical technique, imagined his own winning scenario, and the law operated for him just as it had for the first man. But here's where this journey gets really interesting. This second man wanted absolute proof that his imaginative acts were actually producing these results, that this wasn't just chance or coincidence masquerading as manifestation. So he decided to test the law again, but this time with even more specificity. Instead of just imagining a single win, he imagined bank balances. He saw himself walking into 2 different banks and checking his statements. In one bank, he saw a balance of $10,000. In the other, $15,000. Then he imagined himself at his desk, dividing his racing winnings into 12 separate piles, physically counting out the money with his own hands. He practiced this compound imaginal scene every morning, every afternoon, and every night for less than 1 month. The impact of this repeated impression on his subconscious was building something beneath the surface of his conscious awareness. When he returned to Caliente, something extraordinary happened that reveals the hidden truth about how consciousness actually orchestrates reality. As he filled out his betting tickets, without knowing why, he duplicated 6 tickets exactly. And on 2 of those duplicate tickets, he made what appeared to be a mistake. He marked the same horse twice in the 10th race. That mistake turned out to be the winning selection. He held 2 winning tickets, each paying over $16,000, plus 6 consolation tickets. His total winnings came to $36,788. His imaginary accounting had totaled $36,533. Almost identical. But wait, there's more. At the end of the 9th race, which was one of his major winners, the trainer of that horse actually tried to scratch it from the race. He didn't want the horse to run. If that scratch had been allowed, this man's winning ticket would have been worthless. But the stewards denied the trainer's request. The horse ran and won. His imaginative act had reached out and influenced events entirely beyond his conscious knowledge or control, orchestrating circumstances through channels he couldn't see or predict. Right? Consciousness orchestrates everything, if you're grasping how deep this really goes. Because understanding that your imagination doesn't just attract opportunities, but actually rearranges reality itself, is the game changer. And there's a completely different kind of story that shows how this works even when you're not trying to win anything specific. Not every story about this law involves lottery wins or racetracks. Sometimes the most powerful demonstrations come from people who are simply trying to survive, and their desperation becomes the catalyst for transformation. There was a 55-year-old woman who found herself completely out of work with no family support, no safety net, nothing. She needed everything. Her car was falling apart. She had no proper clothes for job interviews. She was behind on rent. Her bank account was nearly empty, and she knew that at her age, finding decent employment would be nearly impossible in the conventional job market. This woman had been attending Florence Scovel Shinn's lectures for almost a year, listening to all these principles, nodding along, finding them interesting, but never really applying them. She was stuck in that place so many people get trapped in, knowing the information intellectually but not actually living it. But when desperation reaches a certain point, when you're backed into a corner with nowhere else to turn, that's when people finally decide to actually test these teachings. She had nothing left to lose. She started by trying to imagine everything she needed: the car, the clothes, the apartment, the job, the money. But the list was so overwhelming, and she needed everything so urgently, that by the time she finished trying to visualize all these specific things, she was exhausted and her nerves were completely frayed. She couldn't sleep. The practice was creating more anxiety than relief. Then she heard a different approach, a simpler technique that changed everything for her. Instead of imagining specific items and circumstances, she would capture a single feeling. The phrase was simply, "Isn't it wonderful?" Just those 3 words, but used to evoke the feeling that something wonderful was happening to her right now. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when circumstances finally improved. Right now. Every night as she lay in bed entering that drowsy state, she would say to herself, "Isn't it wonderful? Something marvelous is happening to me now." And she would let herself feel exactly the way she would feel if something truly wonderful and unexpected had just occurred in her life. She didn't specify what the wonderful thing would be. She just occupied the feeling of wonderful fortune, of being blessed, of good things flowing to her naturally. For 2 months, she practiced this simple technique every single night, without fail. The hidden truth in this approach is that by not specifying the exact form of the blessing, she allowed her subconscious mind, which is infinitely wiser and more creative than her conscious mind, to select the perfect means of fulfillment. Her decision to release control of the how and simply dwell in the feeling of the wish fulfilled opened a channel she never could have planned or predicted. Comment, "Something wonderful is happening now," if you're feeling this shift in your own consciousness, because what happened next in her story shows just how perfectly the subconscious mind can orchestrate solutions when you get your conscious mind out of the way and simply feel the end result. One day in early October, this woman ran into an acquaintance she hadn't seen in months. They had a brief conversation, and this man mentioned he was about to take a trip to New York City. She had lived in New York many years before, so they chatted casually about the city for a few minutes and then went their separate ways. She thought nothing of it. The encounter seemed completely random, forgettable, just small talk with someone passing through. She forgot about it entirely. 1 month later, to the day, this man appeared at her apartment door. In his hand was a certified check made out to her for $2,500. She was so shocked she could barely speak. When she finally found her voice to ask what this was about, he told her a story that revealed the hidden truth about how consciousness operates behind the scenes. During his trip to New York, he had run into an old friend of hers, someone she hadn't seen or heard from in more than 25 years. This old friend, it turned out, had become extremely wealthy in the intervening years. During their conversation, they spoke about her, and for reasons she would never fully understand through logic alone, this wealthy man from her distant past decided to share a portion of his fortune with her. But the story doesn't end with that single check. For the next 2 years, she received generous monthly checks from this man's attorney. The amounts were so substantial that they covered all her living expenses and left plenty over for that new car she needed, lovely clothes, and a spacious apartment. She no longer needed to work. She no longer needed to worry. The transformation was complete. The desperate woman who had nothing became the woman who had everything she needed, and it all flowed from a source she never could have predicted or planned for. And then, just recently in her journey, she received a letter with legal papers to sign. These Papers guaranteed the continuation of that monthly income for the rest of her natural life. She would never have to worry about money again. She didn't attract what she wanted. She attracted what she was, and what she had become in consciousness through her nightly practice of "Isn't it wonderful?" was the recipient of wonderful fortune. She didn't know how it would come. She didn't imagine a specific source. She didn't try to manipulate or control the means. She simply felt the feeling of being blessed, of wonderful things happening to her, and her subconscious mind selected the perfect channel from infinite possibilities. The impact of this story is profound because it shows that you don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to figure out where the money will come from or how the doors will open. Your only task is to occupy the state, to feel the feeling, to become in consciousness what you wish to be in physical reality. Leave "I trust the process" in the comments if this is resonating with your own journey, because there's one more story that demonstrates how this law can work through multiple people simultaneously, creating what looks like miraculous timing but is actually consciousness in perfect operation. A mother traveled from the East Coast to visit her daughter in San Francisco, excited for what she thought would be a pleasant reunion. But when she arrived, she found her daughter in deep financial distress. The young woman needed $3,000 immediately, and she didn't have it. The situation was urgent, the pressure was real, and panic was setting in. Now, this mother had some resources, but not that kind of cash readily available. Besides, she knew her proud daughter would never accept a direct handout even if she could provide it. So instead of offering money, she offered something far more powerful. She said, "Let me help you in my way." By that, she meant imagination. This mother had been practicing these principles for years and had seen them work repeatedly in her own life. She knew the hidden truth that most people miss entirely, that consciousness creates circumstances, that the inner world shapes the outer world, that what you assume and persist in must eventually materialize. So the mother and daughter sat down together and made a decision that would transform everything. They decided on an imaginal scene they could both practice simultaneously, creating a unified field of consciousness around this desired outcome. They imagined money coming to the daughter from everywhere, not from one specific source, but flooding toward her from every corner, every direction, until she was surrounded by an abundance of money flowing in. But here's the crucial part. They did this with a feeling of joy. They felt happiness for everyone involved. There was no thought of taking from anyone, no sense of manipulation or force. They simply felt abundance flowing naturally and everyone benefiting. The transformation in the daughter's mood was almost immediate. Though there was no physical evidence yet of any money coming, she became the happy, confident person she naturally was when not weighed down by financial pressure. She had assumed the state of someone to whom money flows easily. The mother left San Francisco and flew back to her home on the East Coast. When she arrived, she called her own mother, a lovely 91-year-old woman who insisted she come visit immediately. It couldn't wait even a day. Something urgent had come up. So the woman went, probably wondering what emergency her elderly mother was dealing with. When she arrived, her mother handed her a check for $3,000 made out to the granddaughter in San Francisco. Before the woman could even process what was happening, her mother handed her 3 more checks totaling $1,500 made out to the great-grandchildren, and then another check for $3,000 made out to the woman herself. The grandmother's explanation was simple and seemingly spontaneous. She had suddenly decided the day before, the exact same day the granddaughter began her imaginal practice, to give what she had in cash to those she loved while she was still alive to see their happiness. Right? Perfect timing always. If you're seeing how consciousness orchestrates these coincidences, because understanding that there is no such thing as random timing, that everything is consciousness manifesting in perfect synchronization is what opens you up to trusting this law completely, and there's a deeper principle underlying all these stories that we need to examine now. All of these stories, all of these manifestations, all of these seemingly miraculous transformations, they all operate on one foundational principle that Florence Scovel Shinn understood deeply. When Moses asked God what name he should tell the people, God didn't give some elaborate title or distant concept. God said, "I am that I am. Tell them I am has sent you." This wasn't just a name. This was a revelation of how reality actually works. I am is your awareness. It's your consciousness. It's that fundamental sense of being that remains even when you forget your name, your history, your circumstances. This I am is God, the creator of all things. When you say, "I am wealthy," you're not making a statement about your bank account. You're touching God, your own consciousness, with that quality of wealth. And consciousness, which is the only creative power in the universe, must externalize whatever is impressed upon it. It has no choice. It's law. When you say, "I am poor," you crucify consciousness on the cross of poverty, and poverty must appear in your world. But when you say, "I am wealthy," and genuinely feel it, you resurrect consciousness into a new form. You give birth to abundance in your physical reality. This is why all those stories worked. The people in them weren't praying to some external deity hoping for favor. They were working with their own consciousness, impressing it with the state they desired, and watching that state externalize. The transformation always begins with "I am," with what you declare yourself to be, with what you feel yourself to be at the deepest level. But here's where people get confused, and it's crucial we address this. When Florence Scovel Shinn talked about feeling, she wasn't talking about emotion in the way most people understand it. She wasn't talking about excitement or enthusiasm or working yourself into some kind of emotional frenzy. Feeling, in this context, is the ascent of the subconscious to truth. It's the sense of reality. It's the quiet acceptance that something is so. Most people approach manifestation asking, "Do I want this badly enough?" But that's the wrong question entirely. The question that matters is, how would I feel if this were true right now? That feeling that rises in response, that calm sense of satisfaction, of relief, of it being done. That's the feeling you need to capture and dwell in. When you feel wealthy in this sense, you don't jump up and down. That's emotion, not feeling. When you genuinely feel wealthy, you rest in a quiet consciousness of security. There's no desperation, no anxiety, no need to convince yourself. There's simply the knowing that you have more than enough. The impact of understanding this distinction is enormous because most people exhaust themselves generating emotion when what they actually need is to cultivate feeling. Drop "I feel it" is done in the comments if this clarification is landing for you, because knowing the difference between emotional excitement and the deep feeling of acceptance is what determines how quickly your assumption becomes fact. And there's a practical way to cultivate this feeling that works every single time. At the end of each day, when you're genuinely tired and ready for sleep, this is when you do the most important work of manifestation. Lie down in your bed as you normally would. Let your body relax completely, feeling yourself sinking into the mattress. Let your muscles release, your breathing slow, your mind quiet. Induce what Florence Scovel Shinn called physical immobility, that state where your body feels so heavy and relaxed that you couldn't move even if you wanted to. You're not paralyzed, but you're hovering right on that threshold between waking and sleeping, where the doorway to your subconscious swings wide open. In this state, ask yourself the critical question: how would I feel if my wish were realized right now? Don't answer intellectually. Let the feeling rise in your body. Then choose a single scene that implies your wish is already fulfilled. Not the wish being fulfilled in the future, but a scene that could only happen after it's already been fulfilled. Maybe you're holding a check for lottery winnings. Maybe you're depositing money into your account. Maybe you're telling someone you trust about the unexpected. Windfall. Choose whatever feels most natural and real to you. Now enter that scene as the participant. You're not watching yourself from the outside. You're in it, looking through your own eyes, feeling with your own hands, hearing with your own ears. Make it vivid with all your senses. Feel the texture of that check between your fingers. Hear the congratulations. See the numbers on your bank statement. The more sensory detail, the more real it becomes to your subconscious. Replay this scene over and over, feeling its reality deepen each time until you naturally drift off to sleep within the action. That's the key, falling asleep in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Your last waking moment must be saturated with that consciousness. But the work doesn't stop when you wake up. Throughout your day, every single day, your inner speech is creative. Most people don't realize they're constantly talking to themselves, running an internal monologue that's planting seeds for their future. Harvest. When you see something you'd like to buy and automatically think, "I can't afford that," you're not just stating a fact, you're giving a creative command to your subconscious. When you catch yourself in that old pattern, stop. Revise it immediately. Say instead, "I can easily afford that." This isn't lying or denying reality. The current bank balance is yesterday's harvest. You're planting new seeds for tomorrow's harvest, and the seeds are your words, your inner speech, your habitual thoughts about money and yourself. The transformation happens through this daily vigilance, catching and revising every thought that affirms lack, replacing it with thoughts that affirm abundance. The impact compounds over time. Each revision weakens the old pattern and strengthens the new one until the new becomes your default consciousness. Comment, "New seeds planted daily," if you're committing to this practice, because combining the nightly technique with the daily mental diet creates an unstoppable momentum. And there's one more practice that accelerates everything even further when you understand how to use it properly. Before you even begin your main nightly practice of imagining the wish fulfilled, there's a powerful technique that clears away the debris of the day and prevents old patterns from contaminating your new assumptions. It's called revision, and Florence Scovel Shinn taught that this practice can literally change the effect that past events have on your consciousness. At the end of each day, briefly review what happened. Was there any event that implied lack? Did you experience disappointment about money? Did something happen that reinforced the feeling of not having enough? Take that event and revise it in your imagination. Rewrite it as you wish it had happened. If you were denied something, imagine you received it. If you heard bad financial news, imagine you heard wonderful news instead. If you felt the pinch of limitation, imagine you felt the relief of abundance. Revision doesn't change the past in the outer world, but it absolutely changes what that past does to your consciousness. The event that reinforced lack gets dissolved. In its place is an event that reinforces abundance. And since your consciousness is the only cause of your experience, changing your consciousness changes your future. This practice is particularly powerful for dissolving old wounds, memories of failure, experiences of lack that continue to influence your present moment, even though they're long gone. Now let me tell you a story that proves this law works for anyone, regardless of age or sophistication. There was a young boy who desperately wanted a dog. He had wanted one for as long as he could remember, but his parents had every objection imaginable. The apartment was too small. A dog would be too much trouble. The boy was too young to handle the responsibility. Every logical argument said no, and the boy couldn't refute any of them. But then he overheard his grandmother talking about these teachings, and something clicked. He understood what he needed to do. Every single night, this boy lay in bed and imagined a dog lying beside him. He felt the warmth of the dog against his body. He reached out in imagination and petted the dog, feeling its fur beneath his fingers. He imagined playing with it, taking it for walks, throwing a ball, and watching it run. He didn't know about subconscious minds or states of consciousness or any of the you theory. He just knew that if he felt it real enough, it would become real. And so he did, night after night, falling asleep with that imagined dog beside him. Then something happened that his conscious mind never could have orchestrated. A newspaper in the city organized a program for Kindness to Animals Week. All school children were invited to write an essay on why they would like to own a dog. Out of every child in every school in the entire city, this boy won first prize. And the prize was a beautiful collie puppy, the exact breed he had been imagining. But here's the hidden truth that makes this story so powerful. If someone had just given the parents money to buy a dog, they would have refused. But the way it came, through achievement, through citywide recognition, through newspaper stories and pride, their hearts were changed. They couldn't say no. Write, like a child, I believe, in the comments if this story touches something in you, because the simplicity of this boy's approach is exactly what most adults need to recapture, and understanding why his technique worked so perfectly reveals something critical about how to make your own assumptions feel natural and real. That boy understood something most adults forget in their journey toward manifestation. He didn't complicate it. He didn't analyze whether it was possible. He didn't worry about the obstacles or figure out the logical steps. He simply felt what he wanted to feel and persisted in that feeling until it became his reality. Persistence is everything. The door to lottery money, to unexpected windfalls, to financial freedom, it stands open right now. It's always been open, but you have to walk through it. And the way you walk through is by feeling, by assuming wealth is already yours, by falling asleep every single night in the consciousness of abundance. The law does not fail. It cannot fail. It's as reliable as gravity. What you assume and persist in must become fact. Not might become fact if you're lucky. Not could become fact if conditions are right. Must become fact. The only question is whether you'll persist long enough for the assumption to feel natural, because naturalness is the bridge between imagination and manifestation. Most people give up right before the breakthrough. They practice for a few days or a few weeks, see no immediate evidence in the physical world, and abandon the technique thinking it doesn't work. But the man who won $84,000 practiced for 3 weeks. The woman who received lifetime income practiced for 2 months. The transformation in consciousness was happening the entire time beneath the surface, building momentum, rearranging circumstances, until finally the outer world caught up with the inner assumption. Here's the declaration I want you to take with you. The truth you need to embed into your consciousness so deeply that it becomes your default state of being. Say this to yourself now and mean it. I am that which I feel myself to be. What I assume and feel to be true must externalize in my world. I need not worry about the how. The ways and means are not my concern. My only task is to assume the state and persist in it until it feels natural. I am wealthy. I am fortunate. I am blessed. Wonderful things are happening to me now. Let those words sink in. Let them become your identity. The impact of making this declaration your truth, rather than just nice-sounding words, is the difference between manifesting and merely wishing. These aren't affirmations you repeat mechanically hoping they'll work. This is recognition of what's already true at the level of consciousness, waiting to be externalized. The decisions you make about which state to occupy, which feelings to cultivate, which version of yourself to be, these decisions are creating your tomorrow right now in this present moment. Put, I persist until it's done in the comments if you're committing to this path, because everything we've covered in this teaching comes down to one simple choice you make every single day, every single night. And understanding how to make that choice consistently is what determines whether you remain stuck in the old patterns or break through into the financial freedom you've been seeking. And there's something absolutely critical about timing and expectations that we need to address before we close. If you've made it this far, I want you to know something. You're not here by accident. The fact that you stayed through this entire teaching, that you absorbed these principles, that something in you recognized the truth of what Florence Scovel Shinn discovered, that means you're ready. You're ready for the transformation. You're ready to walk through that open door. I create content like this because I believe these teachings need to reach the people who are genuinely seeking, who are tired of surface-level advice, who want the real principles that actually work. If this video served you, if something shifted in your consciousness while watching, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel. There's so much more to explore together. Deeper teachings, more stories, practical applications of these universal laws that can transform every area of your life, not just finances. And leave me a comment right now saying, "This message was meant for me. So I know you were here. So I know this resonated. So I know you're on this journey with me." Your engagement helps this content reach others who need it just as much as you did. Hit that like button too, because it tells me you want more of this kind of deep, practical spiritual teaching. It's a simple click, but it makes a real difference in who else gets to discover these principles. Now, there's a video right here that goes even deeper into how to handle doubt and resistance when you're trying to hold a new state of consciousness. It's the perfect next step for what we just covered. Click and continue with me over there. I'll see you in the next one.